George, firstly to the 1987 deaths of teenage cousins Mona Lisa and Cindy Smith in Bourke. There's never been justice for the girls. At the time, a man named Alexander Grant was acquitted. He died a few years ago. What did the coroner find in relation to Alexander Grant?
Yes, Narella, this is a horrific case of two Aboriginal girls that were found by the side of the road outside of Bourke about 35 years ago. Now, the coroner made some very powerful findings which resonated with the family, that this man, Alexander Grant, had sexually assaulted Cindy, who was a minor at the time, after she had died in particularly horrific circumstances, and that Grant was driving the car at the time. These were important facts because after the two girls died, Grant changed his story. He admitted at the scene of the crime that he was driving, but then later on changed his story, and he was actually acquitted of killing the two girls by drunk driving. He was also acquitted, well, not acquitted, but the charge was withdrawn against him for interfering with a corpse. He was seen with his arm lying over one of the girls at the time of death, and he actually got off that crime because he convinced the DPP that they couldn't tell whether she was alive or dead at the time.
Now, George, you're making representations to the Attorney-General in order to close that loophole to make sure that can't happen again. Do you think this is going to be Cindy's legacy?
We're hoping that Cindy's law will ensure that predators who assault young or any person, but you can't tell the exact time of death, and therefore you can't tell whether the individual was assaulted before or after death, that this loophole is closed. We will be making representations to the Attorney-General. The coroner said, although it's not strictly her role, she was going to write to the Attorney-General and ask him to consider closing that loophole as well. That would be a fitting memorial.
What about what the coroner found about police? What did she find there?
Well, she was scathing of the police. She said that the investigation was inexplicably deficient, but she went further than that. She actually said that racial bias in the New South Wales police force had affected the quality of their investigation, and ultimately, I think that flowed through to the charges against Mr. Grant.
George, an inquest has also begun this week into the suspicious death of Mark Haines in 1988. The 17-year-old's body was found on train tracks in Tamworth. Are there similarities with how police handled this investigation?
Look, I think there are. There are astounding similarities between Mark Haines' case, which was extensively canvassed in the Blood on the Tracks series. The family have believed for 36 years, a very similar time and place in Western New South Wales, that Mark did not die of suicide. He was found on the tracks with a towel under his head, and it was quite obvious to the family that he was put there by a third party. Now, the coroner has reopened that inquest, commenced it, and there's been quite a bit of new information that's come out, and the coroner has now adjourned those proceedings to allow for further investigations. But the family are very pleased that finally, after 36 years, someone is taking their concerns seriously and listening to them. But can I just say this too, that these two cases are not alone. You've heard of the Bowraville murders, which were never properly investigated. And right now, there's a Senate inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women and children. This is a consistent policy failure of our police, and not just in New South Wales, but around the country, when they fail to properly investigate First Nations murders or missing individuals.
George, these cases happened in the 80s, but are the issues raised by these coroners, do they still exist?
Look, they do. Even you may have heard of Karen Isles. She's running a campaign right now for the police to investigate a violent sexual assault on her, and she's very public about this. She has a website called makepoliceinvestigate.org. She's campaigning for police to investigate sexual assaults in particular on First Nations women but all individuals. Because at the moment, and people are quite surprised about this, there's actually no obligation for police to do a thorough investigation on any crime, let alone sexual assault.
Now, George, also this week, the coroner handed down findings into the police shooting death of Todd McKenzie. He was having a severe psychotic episode at home alone when police arrived. There was a 9-hour siege that ended with his death. Why did the coroner find the police action was flawed?
Look, I think what was critical in Todd's case, and by the way, the National Justice Project is acting in all these cases. In Todd's case, the coroner felt that the action that the police took really criminalised Todd, who was having a mental health issue, but he was alone in his home. He wasn't a threat to any individual. But by taking the action they did, they put Todd's life at risk, and actually he died in the police intervention. But she also said that that action put the lives of police at risk as well. And what should have happened was a more de-escalatory approach, and perhaps the police weren't the most appropriate people to attend that situation, or at least attend but be led by information from the family or a psychologist or psychiatrist who may have been able to de-escalate that situation. She said that the police ran a flawed action, and that ultimately did lead to Todd's death. She said that they should have considered seeking help from mental health professionals or the family before they interacted. And increasingly commonly, she also said that they should have had their body-worn cameras on so we could have some accountability for what happened.
George Newhouse, National Justice Project, thank you for joining us.